Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda.
Hey, we want to talk with you today about what it's like to be a godly husband in the family of and husband to your wife.
You know, we have a lot of couples that we interact with. Some are pretty sure of what it looks like to be a godly husband, and they're just growing in that role. We have others that really don't know. They never had a godly example. And then we have those that I'm the head of my house, and they kind of rule with a rod of iron. So we want to talk to all that.
Yeah, so first of all, we want to look at our example, Jesus, and how did he lead? How does Jesus treat us? And so he doesn't rule over us with a rod of iron. He gives us, we still have our free will, and we choose to submit to him. So it's going to be the same way in the husband-wife relationship, where a wife has to choose to, because she wants to follow her husband.
You know, submission is willingly given. It's not something demanded or taken. In the marriage, we have so many expectations, don't we? Mm-hmm. And I think when our spouse doesn't measure up, it's too easy to go in and start insisting and demanding. But when we look at our relationship with God, he allows us to grow into, just more naturally, things as we are able.
We have differences, and God delights in that. And so in the husband-wife relationship, a husband should delight in the difference that his wife brings to the table, accept that, and realize that's part of the strength that the family has. God values our input. He allows us to cooperate and work with him in his expression in the earth, the same way in the marriage, where a husband allows the influence of his wife, allows her to speak and have a voice and have influence.
We look at God on earth working through us, and we represent him on the earth. Without him micromanaging, we're not puppets for him that he just moves around. He gives us a lot of free will.
You know, Jesus was touched with the feeling of our infirmities, and a husband needs to be touched with the feelings that his wife has. And typically in the marriage relationship, a woman does have a lot of emotions that she expresses.
More than the men.
Yeah, and so, you know, being able to work with that and be able to be touched with and have empathy for all the emotions that she brings.
You know, when we look in Genesis 2, where God made man and woman in the first place, we see that, you know, Adam said, she's bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And here God said to him, you need a helper. So he created Eve. And then God said, now this is why you're supposed to leave your father and mother, cleave to her, and that means pursue.
Pursuing her influence, pursuing what she brings, and knowing that that is valuable and that is help. And sometimes we have to reinterpret what we're hearing and think, no, this is not an attack, it's help, and I receive that.
Yeah, and she's also created in the image of God. God made male and female in his image.
In the likeness of God, male and female.
Not one to be lesser than the other.
In life or in our relationships, we can have a self-focus, right? And we can be focused on doing what I want and pleasing ourselves. And we don't want to have that in our marriage. We need, as a husband and wife, we need to be seeking to please the other one. And that's kind of what we see in 1 Corinthians 7, where it talks about that we're supposed to please one another.
It even talks about the single man and the married man, the single woman and the married woman, are not the same as far as even relationship with the Lord. There's something of this earth that we have to pay attention to, and that's how can I please my spouse.
And you know, he said that we don't have power of our own body. The husband doesn't have power of his body, but the wife does, and vice versa. That means that we're not calling all the shots, that, you know, excuse me, my spouse has that power to call some shots too.
And, you know, being able to have mutual submission in the marriage is what healthy marriage is all about. When you've got a he and a she being two blending into one, and one dominates and silences the other, that's not union.
Right. We don't need to be defrauding each other. Again, in 1 Corinthians 7, he talks about that we are to not hold back something that's due to our spouse. And so typically for the wife, that is going to be emotional intimacy, and we don't need to be withholding something that belongs to our spouse.
You know, in Ephesians 5, God talks about loving the church so much that he gave himself for her, and that husbands are supposed to love their wives to the extent that they would lay it all down, die to self for her sake.
I think we have that ingrained in us by God. Typically as men, I think we do think in a more self-sacrificing way, and we just need to make sure that we're exercising that toward our wife.
You know, a lot of men would say, "Oh, I would die for her," but would you lay down yourself on an emotional level, on a spiritual level?
Would you
for
live?
her?
Would you live?
Would you live
Not
for
just
her?
die, but would you live? So also Jesus loved us so much that he gave himself for us. And so also a husband is going to show his love by giving himself for his wife.
And we talk in Ephesians 5, he talks about the washing of water by the words and getting rid of spots, blemishes, wrinkles. And the way we see that is that has to do with conflict, issues that are maybe unresolved, things that need to be addressed. And look at how the man is being told, like Christ, to interact with her with words, because women a lot of time are craving verbal and emotional connection with their husbands. And they need him to be able to interact with them over these issues and things so they stay cleaned out instead of building walls.
You know, Jesus nourishes and cherishes the church, and so that's the same thing a husband is going to do by nourishing or feeding, caring for his wife and everything that she has need of.
So in 1 Peter 3, in verse 7, he talks about valuing and honoring her because of who she is, because she's God's instrument to be used on him.
You know, a wife is not a doormat. She's not someone that a person's going to walk on. This isn't a dictator, puppet, or parent-child relationship.
So we see the woman in the Word as having power and authority. Look at Proverbs 31 woman, buying and selling fields and clothing the household with scarlet. She was definitely a partner.
She was definitely spending money and had authority to do so. She had she had the purse strings.
And we look at the church as, she's not a weakling. She's supposed to be a woman of power and authority. And so is the wife in the marriage. When we look at finances and parenting and all the parts, we see two people operating in positions of power.
In the husband-wife relationship, a husband needs to be the kind of person a wife wants to submit to. Submission is not something that's demanded. It's something that's freely given.
It's important that he's first obedient to the word himself before he starts demanding submission from her.
And I love the he plus she equals we. This is all about partnership. It's not about subtracting the wife's influence out of the relationship. It's about adding 1 + 1, and that equals two people that are doing life together.